In the Saturday night 2-1 overtime loss to the Utah Hockey Club, an incident happened on the Bruins bench. Now, I briefly touched on it in my last video, but I truly thought nothing of it. I saw the video clip, but all I saw was a coach who usually is restrained yelling at his captain for making a bad play that led to a goal. Now, that goal was called back for being offside, but Monty couldn't call back what he did on the bench. This morning, I listened to the 32 Thoughts the podcast and found it was being made more of a deal than I previously thought. In this video, I'm going to look into this further and give my thoughts and share others' thoughts to the answer to the question, did Monty go too far with Brad Marchand on the bench? So buckle up, Bruins fans. I'm here to give you the latest info on your beloved Boston Bruins. If you've been liking my Bruins content, please leave me a like and subscribe. If you've already done so, thank you, and let's get into it. After a 2-1 overtime loss, my comment section was flooded with calls for Bruins to fire Montgomery. And this was truly the first time I had seen any comments like this in my comment section. I personally think it's far too early in the season for that kind of talk, but who am I to say? None of these comments were directed on what happened on the bench though, and more about the people thinking Monty isn't the right coach for the Bruins team and they need a tougher approach. I can't help but think it's funny people are now calling for a tougher approach because that's exactly what they had previously with former Bruins head coach Bruce Cassidy. Yet, so many fans cheered when he was let go. I personally thought the firing of Cassidy was a mistake, but I have bias in the situation that I care not to discuss, so I won't go down that road. We're only 6 games into the season, and the Bruins have a winning record. They're scoring goals, but they have no scoring depth. And in the last game, they looked slow, and they played undisciplined, like they have all season. All their scoring is coming from a select few players, and mainly the fourth line right now. That is a good problem to have when your bottom 6 is going well, but when your top 6 is struggling, it can be a bit concerning. I'm not putting the scoring on Montgomery at all, but the undisciplined play can only be fixed by him and setting an example that he won't stand for it anymore. Which leads us to the incident on Saturday night of him laying it into Brad Marchand on the bench after he cops up the puck on a lazy play and that puck goes in the back of the net. Being undisciplined doesn't just mean getting penalties, which the Bruins lead the league in, but making lazy plays and doing things you don't normally do is also undisciplined. That is why, at the time, I commended Monty for finally not putting up with it anymore. And who better to lay into and make an example of than your captain and veteran presence on the team, Brad Marchand. Marchand made no mention of the incident after the game because he's a professional and knows he was in the wrong on the play.
I mean, it's one of those ones that we would want, I think. It might be a little soft. Nothing came out of it. Usually in overtime, they call stuff on, chances or turnovers, stuff like that. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it was a trip, so, it's too bad we killed it off, and guys did a good job there. But it's unfortunate, passes just turning up the ice, and it kind of gets caught. Those things happen.
With the amount of stuff that was let go in the third by the refs, is it particularly frustrating when they turn around and make a call like that?
I mean, that's part of the game. They're not going to call everything, and they're doing their best out there. Whether they get it right or wrong, it's not really up to me, and it doesn't change anything now. They're trying. They can't call everything. So it is what it is.
What Monty did sent a message to the team that no player is safe, just like he did to Pasternak in the playoffs last year when he called him out for his competitiveness against Toronto.
You got so much out of Marchand earlier in this series. Do you need more out of both him and Pasternak in for Game 7?
Your best players need to be your best players this time of year. I think the effort is tremendous. They need to come through with some big-time plays and big-time moments. I think Marchand has done that in the series. Boston needs to step up.
Pasternak answered the call with a brilliant Game 7 performance and won the series for the Bruins in overtime. What I didn't see in this whole Marchand thing was what Elliot Friedman pointed out on 32 Thoughts the Podcast.
From Saturday night's games, the Boston Bruins, Utah Hockey Club. So the Bruins fall 2-1 in overtime. They get a point out of it. But a lot of the chatter post-game was the interaction between Jim Montgomery on the bench and their captain, Brad Marchand. So Marchand had a turnover that led to a goal. Ultimately, it got called back because it was determined the play was offside. But Montgomery let him hear it. What did you think when you saw it? And what's been some of the reaction that you've gotten since then?
I thought it was kind of jarring. Like, you just don't see that much anymore. One thing about Montgomery is that there are players and agents who complain that there are some coaches out there that don't go after the best players. They'll make examples out of, players who are deeper down the roster or younger, and they don't have really the power, and some coaches are afraid to go after those players. Jim Montgomery called out David Pastrnak during the playoffs, and he went hard after Marchand there. It was jarring, I would say. You don't see coaches yell at players like that on the bench too much anymore. It made me wonder what exactly has gone on behind the scenes between the two of them. Have they had debates about something that Marchand has done, or is there a reason that maybe Montgomery was more upset at Marchand there than you would think would be normal? But the one thing that I did wonder about, like personally with me, like I only judge others as I judge myself. If my coach or someone was to freak out at me like that, I don't think I would get too upset about it as long as it wasn't like a regular occurrence. If it's a regular occurrence, you've really got a breakdown in communication between player and coach. But the one thing I wondered about was like the contact. In this day and age, Kyle, there isn't supposed to be contact, and ultimately Marchand can decide and the Bruins can decide if this is something that is a problem for them. That's the one thing I wonder about, Kyle, in this day and age is it okay to make contact? You?
I'm totally with you there, because there is that line that can't be crossed. And when you look at the video back, I mean, I would say I couldn't read lips totally there, but whatever Montgomery was saying in that moment probably was a lot more aggressive than the nudge or the contact, as you say, that he made with the back of Marchand there. And Montgomery, when he came into Boston 2 years ago, he said that first season, he basically just had to stand behind the bench. Like we would joke that he didn't have to do much coaching because of how well that team was running on most nights. Last year, that started to change. You referenced calling out Pastrnak at the most critical moment of that first-round series against Toronto. And now in the early stages of this season, we've got visual evidence out in the field of play of him going after the Bruins captain there. So I think it's one thing to voice your displeasure for a player, but now you're inviting potentially some issue if the other parties involved decided that it is an issue when you're introducing contact to the equation.
The thing about it, the timing of it that was most eyebrow-raising, I think, to a couple people is, and they're listeners of the pod, like we talked about on Friday about the Bruins being so consistent because the work ethic and the way they prepare and the high IQ has been passed down, like from the Chara to the Bergeron to the leadership of this group now. And then to see that on the bench a day later, just the timing of our comments and that happening really raised an eyebrow, like I said, with some people. I mean, I always look at what happens in the days after something like this. How do you perform in your next game? How does everybody react to it? That'll give us an idea of where this is going or if it's even going anywhere. Maybe it's just one of those things where people have a bad day or people have an emotional night and everybody understands they're rowing in the same direction and they move on. I mean, also don't forget that, Brad Marchand is in the middle of a contract negotiation with the Bruins. And, he has talked about how he will keep this quiet. I think they've been grinding away at trying to see if they can get something done. It's definitely been a lot more quiet than, say, the Swayman negotiation was, because that one was more pressing. But all of these things, that to me, it's never the moment that's necessarily the big story. It's what comes out of the moment. And I think we're still waiting to determine and see what that is. Does anybody think that they crossed a line here in a way that it's going to be a problem? We'll find out.
I truly don't know how I missed it at all. And even after I watch it again, I had to really, really look into it to see Montgomery tap Marchand. It was a tap and not a hit. But Friedman is right. If Marchand wanted to make something of this, he could turn it into something and most likely cost Montgomery his job. We have seen countless examples over the years of coaches being fired for either abusive player or inappropriate behavior. I'm not saying what Montgomery did on the bench has any comparison to Bill Peters or Mike Babcock situations. But I want to point out that the NHL takes these types of incidents seriously, especially after the bad look during that whole Chicago Blackhawks scandal. Now, Bill Peters was accused of kicking 2 players on the bench during his tenure with the Carolina Hurricanes, but wasn't fired for that. But Calgary used that as an example of a pattern of abuse when they fired him. I think Monty gave Marchand more of a tap than a punch, and it was more of a wake-up tap, but he still put his hands on a player. I also think this would be a dead issue, but will now get overblown today because of 32 Thoughts the Podcast. Heck, it has me talking about it again, but I thought I should share some background and my thoughts on it. Marchand, to my knowledge, has not filed a complaint nor has said anything publicly about it. He has had his chance to say something after the loss and didn't. He spoke about being undisciplined, taking ownership, that he didn't play good enough, and as a team, that's what cost him the game. That is what a good captain should do, and he did. I don't want to speculate on what was said between the two of them after the game, but I'm sure today some reporters are going to bring it up to Marchand. Being the guy he is, I'm sure he will nip it in the butt right away and most likely stand up for his coach. Marchand consistently stands up for his teammates and coaching staff every situation he gets throughout his career and is why so many players speak so highly of him. He is a guy you hate to play against but want on your team, not just because of the on-ice performance, but how he holds himself off the ice. To me, the true test of this whole thing is how the team rises above what we see from them against the Nashville Predators on Tuesday night. Marchand hasn't gotten a goal this season and needs to step it up, so I expect a lot more jump from him against Nashville. If they continue to take stupid penalties like Pasternak's in OT, or countless others they've done this year, then Cam and Don need to have another discussion because they need to understand why the team is playing this way. Was Montgomery too easy on them and now the inmates are running the asylum? It's anyone's guess right now. I don't think Montgomery deserves to be fired, and I also think what happened on the bench wasn't as bad as some are making it out to be. He shouldn't have put his hands on Marchand. So, I doubt this will go without a conversation. There is no pattern of abuse, and in fact, quite the opposite. But the fact of the matter is, Montgomery did put his hands on a player and did it on live TV. We will see what comes of this, but I have a feeling it won't be too much, except a media circus just for a bit. The only real opinion on this matter that matters is Brad Marchand's, and if he's asked about it, I'm sure he'll voice that opinion. I've given you my opinion, but I want to hear from you on this issue, so please let me know in the comments. That's a wrap on today's video. To stay up to date on all the news surrounding the Boston Bruins, please subscribe and drop me a like. If news breaks surrounding the Boston Bruins, be sure to check out the channel. If you've already subscribed to the channel, thank you, and I'll see you next time.